Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishasan Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishasane Kar Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishasane Kar Uta Vardhani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Seje Ningne Sowa Debe Tse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshun Yila Sambe Dede Malepa Geme Lungi Drubra Jingi Lo Tsoni Sodan Diktun Shabe Tse Dingi Namke Yin Su Lekshune Labchen Tsoni Yonsu Tsopa Dan Chera Nyetun Chamra Jingil Jancho Pargi Ninzen Tukun Tu Nyu Peme Siudru Lekshune Jancho Drube Gegen Kunshish Tingen Dela Drubra Jingilo Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chemin Samjor Ngemba Shiwa Dan Chedan Tumbe Dede Malupa Beme Lungi Drubra Jingilo Dorna Tingne Tserawa Tamchen Techi Pardune Kav Tamche Tu Rese Kyamne Lama Keleme Tukje Chingi Dala Sikso So Gongyab Drewe Nyamda Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuje Kudan Sungi Nawa Drame Tu Nyam Sunyongwe Kesan Tobrai Kewa Kuntu Yanda Lama Dan Drame Cheki Pela Longchech Sadan Lamgi Yenten Rabzone Dorje Changi Kopa Nyurtob Shoya Pakyuke Kudan Dagilu Pakyuke Sundan Dagianga Pakyuke Tudan Dagiyi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lo Makyuke Kuda Lo Makyuke Sundan Dagi Makyu Tudan Dagi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha Sashipu Ki Choshi Ameto Tramare Rabalinga Shi Nide Gempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulwarki Drokunamda Ingla Chöpar Shoyidam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kamniryatayami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chanam La Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chim Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chanam La chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola penchira sange dru parasho sange chedan tsoge chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi chushe gibe sonam ki drola penchira sange dru parasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment, with the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. Geshe Chekawa said something. The mind is full of defects, but it has a great quality. That which you teach it, the mind follows, or rather, our being in general, on a physical level, also on a mental level, is malleable, or rather, it transforms according to the context in which it finds itself. It adapts marvelously. But this ability of ours to adapt comes according to the interaction that happens. In our free will, our freedom of choice, we can direct ourselves to adapt our mind, our being in general, towards that which we desire. But here there's a point. When we talk about the development of altruism, the importance of love, of compassion, wisdom, yesterday we also talked about this a long time, where do we need to familiarize ourselves with the concept of love or with the feeling? The feeling itself, also the concept, but that's superficial. It's important, but it's a starting point. If we're able to develop a true altruism, even if we can't explain it, but we feel it, we don't need to be the learned ones that can explain every word about altruism. But the point is, if I need to familiarize myself with a feeling and not with a concept, to familiarize myself with that feeling, I need to feel it. I can't familiarize myself with something without experiencing that same thing. That's why often one of the most tiring points of the path is we get to a point where we can understand, we follow a certain logic, and within our view it's clear the importance of altruism, the importance of love and generosity, humbleness, etc. It's all clear to us. And every once in a while, when we take this shortcut and we say to ourselves, how is it that I've understood but I haven't made a change? it's because what we need to familiarize ourselves with is the feeling. That's where we need to train. And there are methods to help us do that. Because how can I generate, train in a feeling, train in a mental state? I can do that by generating that mental state and then stay with that mental state of consciousness as long as possible. There is no other way. In an artificial way, we can say, because it's not spontaneous or natural. We need to generate what we want to then come spontaneously, right? Another important concept is our mind is not able to have two mental states of consciousness that are opposite at the same time. One right after the other, yes, but simultaneously, no. So what is the how does selfishness manifest? Thinking what is good I want for myself, and what is bad or harmful I want far away from me. This is the attitude of selfishness. And so if we were to eliminate selfishness, we would need to generate a mind that is its direct opposite. And what would that look like? What is good I offer to others, I share, and what is bad I take for myself. This is not about taking the weight of others onto ourselves, the burden of others. No, we are generating the opposite mind of the selfish mind. The text says, Lelen tamche chiglada kun la katin chepargom, and then banish the one to blame for everything. Meditate on the great kindness of all beings. Or then it goes on to say, practice a combination of giving and taking. You need to giving and taking should be practiced alternately, and you should begin by taking from yourself. The technique to develop is called Tonglen in Tibetan. Tonglen, Tong means give, and Len means take. And this is a technique of training to generate an inner state that is opposite to selfishness, so that we can gradually overcome our own selfishness and generate a sincere feeling of altruism. So it's an exercise. It's a meditation. Let's remember, meditation means also to familiarize. It's an exercise to familiarize ourselves with a state of consciousness that is opposite that of selfishness on a very practical level. So today we'll go right to the point. Practice a combination of giving and taking. Something curious is that the practice is called Tong Len. Tong is give and Len take. But we actually practice Len Tong. We first take and then we give. Those who say that the reason why we practice Len Tong, but we actually call it Tong Len, is that in the Tibetan language it's quite important how the syllables sound is very important for the Tibetan language, and sometimes for a reason of sound things can be changed. And so it's said that like Len Tong sounds Chinese, it doesn't sound good. So we practice Len Tong, but it's called Tong Len. That's one of the reasons. It's a quite mundane reason. That's one of the explanations that is given. What is this practice made up of? We start from a very important part of the practice that is often not described. And here in the book that I have, this description, the commentary by Trizhan Dorje Chang, the master of Lama Ganshin. And the first times I explained this practice, I remember one day after lunch, Lama Ganshin asked me how I was explaining, and then I told him, he said, okay, like this is okay, because there's this first part that's often not explained, but is very, very important. What we'll do initially, we imagine in this area around our heart chakra, we imagine a black mass. I imagine it the size of a fist. Very dense. Yucky. It's very, very dense. And it's sticky, like tar. It smells bad. Something ugly. This black mass, dense mass, and then there's at a certain point, as a kind of like black smoke, a black light, every negativity of our body together with our negative emotions, our fears, our anger, our envy, any negativity that we have, it becomes absorbed into this black mass. This black mass represents our selfishness, our self-centeredness, absorbed everything that comes from selfishness. And so we have at our heart the black mass of our selfishness that absorbs onto it our physical sicknesses, our negative karmic forces, our negative emotions, that all comes from selfishness. Let's call it selfishness, and all and everything that derives from selfishness is absorbed into this black mass at our heart. Possibly, one imagines that black mass, and until one actually feels nauseated by it, when one really wants to be free from this weight, the sensation of this black mass is the lack of space, lack of inner space, something that takes up our energy and pulls us down. Once we've done this, we visualize other beings around us. In visualizing other beings, we start first with what we said yesterday, which is one. We connect with the gratitude towards others, and number two, we connect with the fact that we are on the same plane. Normally, we start first with equanimity. We imagine the beings around us, and when we do, we try not to imagine beings in a general way, but we start with the 5 categories. So first of all, we should be done with these 5 categories of beings, which are our family members, the people that we live with, our friends, the people that we have helped, but in exchange they have hurt us. So we have perhaps some kind of resentment towards this group of people. And the 5th would be those for whom we have a certain karmic aversion. We have aversion and we're not sure exactly why. Let me repeat. The first 3 categories or the ones to whom we have a certain attraction or indifference. So family members, our co-workers, the ones we live with, we share our daily life with, and then and our friends, and then those that we have helped, but in exchange have received some kind of hurt, and then the fifth is a group for whom we have some kind of karmic aversion. So we can start with these first three, and then five. We can also start with those who are very close, our family members and friends, and then those that we share our daily life with, and then those for whom we have this karmic aversion, and lastly, those who we deem have hurt us in exchange when we think that we have helped them. So all these beings around us, so it can also be animals, but normally we start with people. So we imagine these beings around us. We observe that even they are taken by their suffering, want to be happy like we do. Even they do what they do, trying to be happy and trying to free themselves from their suffering, guided by their own selfishness and ignorance in the same way we do. And until we're able to feel that we're in the same boat, that there's no difference among us, and then we connect with the feeling that our well-being depends on the interaction with others. It depends also on their being, and we gradually develop a feeling of closeness and gratitude. In front of this, we induce the idea, your happiness is important to me as my own, and your suffering as important to me as my own. I want you to be happy. I don't want you to suffer. We stay on this. We allow to expand that feeling of attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering that we have within it. We try to expand it towards others. And at this point, we inhale. And as we inhale, we imagine that for those people around us, their suffering, their physical sufferings, their mental suffering, their negative karmic force that they've accumulated since beginningless time, their own mental defilements, etc., every negativity that they have comes in the form of dense, thick, dark smoke that enters into our nostrils and absorbs into this black mass at our heart. This is very important. And when it absorbs in that black mass at our heart, there are two negative forces that when they come together, they eliminate each other. So the more I take the negativity of others onto myself, absorbing into the black mass of selfishness, the more this black mass of selfishness becomes weakens. At this point is very important, because otherwise there are those who take on the negativity on to oneself in a general way, and this doesn't work. There's also a funny story about this. A friend of ours, Mr. Koch, and he's a long time disciple, friend of Lama Ganchen. He told this story. He needed to have a surgery to take away his prostate, and he was in the hospital for this surgery. They had already seen everything, and before the surgery, they did the last sonogram to see how big the prostate was, to see what kind of surgery they needed to do. It was all defined, ready. And after this, as he was waiting for the surgery, he said, well, given that they're going to remove this, he did Tonglen, imagining that all the sufferings of the hospital would come onto it directly into his prostrate. And they did the surgery. The surgery was fine. But at the end, when he came out of the surgery and was awake, the surgeon said something really strange happened. When we came to actually remove the prostrate, it was much bigger than we had seen. So we had to do a different kind of surgery, which went fine, but we'd like to keep it. We'd, to study it. We've never seen something so big. It's very strange. And we don't know what happened. And he said, I know what happened, but I'm not going to tell you. So this is a story. And I take advantage to say something, though. No matter how much I try to take on someone else's suffering, it's not possible. You cannot transfer someone's karma onto you. What I experience is fruit of my experiences, and what you experience is the result of your actions. And no sentient being, no sacred holy being has the ability to take on himself the suffering or negative karma of someone else. Sometimes I've heard this expression, this is quite ignorant. Oh, I got his karma. This is stupid. No, what can happen is a person is living something difficult. I get close to that person, and that becomes a condition through which I ripen a karma of my own, but I'm not taking on someone else's karma. And someone might say, well, at this point, when I do the practice of Tonlan, what am I doing? I'm generate an attitude that is opposite my own selfishness. I'm generating altruistic mind. And I imagine that I actually am taking on everyone else's suffering that comes in the form of this black smoke, enters through my nostrils, and absorbs where in the black mass of selfishness that gradually becomes more and more weak. And when I breathe, when I breathe out, I imagine all my qualities of my body, all the material things I own, my inner virtues of body, speech, and mind, my positive karmic force, any quality that I have is transformed into what every being needs. Affection for those who are lonely, medicine for those who are sick, help for those who are in trouble, food for those who are hungry, until it's transformed into dharma for those who are ready to receive it, bringing all beings to a state of peace and joy. This from the light that then comes from our heart out of our nostrils and going to all beings. And then again, we inhale black smoke, taking on their sufferings. At the beginning, it's difficult to dedicate at the beginning, it's easier to dedicate. At the beginning, it's difficult to, okay, so I inhale and I'm thinking of the negativities. I exhale and thinking of the positive qualities. So at the beginning, we put emphasis on taking on the negativities of others. That can last 5-10 minutes, as much time as you want to dedicate. And then one puts emphasis on the giving the joy, the happiness, the well-being to others. And this process, little by little, the more you're familiar with it, the more you're able to unite them with your actual breathing, inhaling, exhaling. It's a simple practice, extremely powerful, and not that easy to do sincerely. Little by little, we expand to include more and more beings around us. So we have our family members, we have our friends, and then their family members, their friends, and the friends of the friends, and the friends of the friends of the friends of the friends. And then those that we know, acquaintances that we don't have a particular feeling for, quite indifferent, and then we expand it to those with whom we're in conflict, those for whom we feel actual aversion, and then we expand to include everyone. We do this for the time allotted that we establish, and then gradually at the end of practice, what happens is we imagine that the beings around us are in a state of peace, and that black mass of selfishness at our heart is completely gone. It's completely melted. So we're at peace with ourselves. They're in peace with themselves, and we're at peace among ourselves. At this point that I said that's important, this aspect of the black mass of negativity at our heart, because that negativity goes towards that black mass of selfishness, even if the attitude is taking on to myself. But as it's like I say, I see you've got some garbage to throw away, give it to me. But then I need to put it somewhere. So I have the tools. I know how to recycle that garbage. So I'll take it. Similarly, I take the negativities of others, but I know what to do with it, which is I'm going to use it to oppose my own selfishness, because that attitude of taking negativities onto myself is the exact opposite of selfishness. An attitude that's directly opposite is what we're generating. And so not only as a visualization, but as a state of consciousness, an inner attitude, we are opposing selfishness. Is that clear? What happens is the following, answering a question that I couldn't hear. We can't take on to ourselves the suffering of anyone, but that doesn't mean that when I think about you, that there isn't an interaction with you. It doesn't mean that there isn't a process of healing. This doesn't mean that prayers don't have benefit, aren't beneficial. Once I think about you and I dedicate to you, and I do the practice of Tonlen for you, thinking about you, there's a natural interaction that will help you. But I'm not the Superman that can just take away all the suffering of all beings. At the same time, the only real way that I have to help other beings is by eliminating my own selfishness, facing it myself, to then be able to help others. So as we do this practice, one, it's a sincere feeling. I want the suffering of others, I want it to diminish, and I manifest this by generating an image and generating this feeling that is going also that weakens and eliminates my selfishness. Because if I take on the negativity onto myself without knowing where to direct it, if they need to take away the prostate, then I have it absorb into the prostate, that's one thing. But if I'm just absorbing negativities in general, I can create a condition that is not at my favor. At the same time that we can't eliminate others' suffering, it doesn't mean that these meditations don't have a positive interaction with others towards those for whom we do this practice. So even there are people who have special healing abilities, but a healer can't heal someone else. He can interact in a certain way that helps the other heal himself or herself. I don't know if that difference is clear. For example, I've seen marvelous healers can do incredible healers and also be in front of people that they weren't able to help at all. Why? Because in reality, the healer is nothing other than someone that interacts, creates a condition so that the other person can be healed and follow his own healing process. If that person is not ready or doesn't have the conditions, is not able to begin a healing treatment, he can be surrounded by Buddhas, but it's not going to make any difference. It's important in this practice. It's important for the feeling to be sincere, that we know where to direct these negativities, but that we, first of all, that we allow ourselves to open ourselves up to others. Now, the practice in itself is quite simple, and what's important is doing it. One needs to have his own experience. There's an important point here that says, it's that third line says, practice a combination of giving and taking. Giving and taking should be practiced alternately, and you should begin by taking from yourself. These two should be made to ride on the breath, using the breath as a support. That third line, you should begin by taking from yourself. Actually, Lempe Gorim Ranetsam can be translated in two different ways. You can translate it in two different ways. You should begin, and both traditions are valid. You can take by taking from yourself, or by taking onto yourself or from yourself, because that other point which says you should start by taking from yourself, this shows something very, very important and very powerful, which is the following. That same practice, it's the same practice that we said before, but with a fundamental difference, and this should be done first, in front of us. We don't imagine a person like a friend or family member or someone with whom we have difficulty. We imagine ourself from the past. For example, we have ourselves in a particular moment where we felt a lot of suffering. Maybe when we were children, or last month, 20 years ago, it doesn't matter. Because what happens is, when we experience a moment of particular suffering, a part of our identity it becomes blocked, as if it were frozen. And we stay somehow blocked in that situation, that experience. And until I'm able to be at peace with my own past and with myself, I will never have the strength to take on the suffering of others and give my positive attributes. So first I need to be at peace with myself to be able to give. So at this point we do the practice of Tonlin on ourselves of the past. So I imagine in front of myself that particular moment that I lived, that situation of particular suffering that I lived, and having that self in front, which is not the self of today. Even in one day, I've transformed, I've changed. I'm imagining myself of the past, this past self. I see the suffering. I see how much this past self wanted to be happy, and how this past self acted guided by ignorance, the way I do today still. So it's the same process, and I have a feeling of love and compassion. And at that point, I take that suffering of the past, of that past moment, in the form of black smoke, and I absorb it into this in this present moment, in this mass of this black mass at my heart, and I give light. And I do this until gradually I'm able to perceive, I'm able to feel that that identity, that memory of that past self is at peace. That tension generated in the past is pacified, and that wound is healed, and I feel at peace with that past self. If one does this meditation well, probably the first times one will end up crying and maybe even feeling more pain than anything else, because what happens is at the beginning, when one sees that state and brings light to that past self, one has a hard time overcoming those feelings, and it can be uncomfortable. And I repeat, this is not a comfortable, pleasurable practice. It can be also, the process can be really uncomfortable, but the result is beautiful. But in this case, seeing one's own shadows, one's own wounds, this is not something that's easy, but we allow ourselves to see and to be in front of it all without judging, because in the same way I don't judge other beings, I'm not judging my past self, and I don't say, oh, poor you, who's guilty for this. No, in this whole process we're not looking for the guilty one. We simply are kind, and we act out of love and kindness. It's like we see someone who's upset, and we don't need to say what happened. What's important for us is being able to act affectionately and give love and help that person face that difficult moment. Is that clear? So we don't get into any kind of dialogue, what happened and who was right, who was wrong. We don't victimize ourselves. We don't blame ourselves or others. No, simply we see that pain. We see that suffering. We see those wounds, that malaise, and we act with kindness and love. And little by little, that suffering melts. And we send light, bringing a state of peace to that past self, and until we're able to imagine that past self, it's fine. We've overcome that pain, and then that past self at peace absorbs into us, and we become one thing. We're at peace with our past self. Once we're able to do that, we do the same thing with our present self. Is there something in this present moment that is not sitting well? There's some kind of problem. Then at that point, we imagine our present self in front of us, and we do the same practice. And then we can imagine our future self, the fears that we have for ourselves. Maybe this is going to happen, maybe that happens, or this, that, and the other, because we have an image of ourself, of the future, that is often stricken by fear. And we take on the sufferings of the future, we bring them to this present moment, pacifying all those fears. And once we're able to be at peace with our past, present, and future selves, at that point we have the strength to be able to see others, to welcome others, take on the suffering of others, and give them joy, well-being, virtue. This is important. It's important that when someone, for example, I've seen people who had a predisposition for love and generosity, compassion, kindness, really beautiful people with this predisposition to help people. But when these people were in situations where their basic needs were not covered, emotionally, physically, their ability to see others and be of help to others was really diminished. That's natural. So first of all, before giving to others, I need to take care of myself. And it's not a selfish attitude. I'm creating the foundation to then be able to give to others. It's like saying, if there's someone who's there drowning, well, I mean, if I don't know how to swim, how can I help that person? Or if there's someone is in a burning house and I need to save that person, first I need to protect, I need to be able to put on some kind of protective gear so that I can not burn myself. So first I need to be at peace with myself to then be at peace with others. And I assure you that this part of the Tonlen practice often is much more difficult than the following one, because there's this attitude sometimes that we want to give to others to run away from ourselves. This happens too. There's this attitude of wanting to save the world and to go towards those who are in the most desperate of situations. Why? Because not fully, but there's an important part. It's a way, given that there's situations with so much suffering that I don't come into contact with my own suffering, so I help others, and by doing that I run away from myself. I mean, this happens. It's better to run away from oneself helping others than running away from oneself by abusing oneself or drinking, etc. So in this process, we first start by taking from ourselves. And this requires, and naturally it will generate something that it should, I'd say it would be better if it were natural or spontaneous, but it's not that obvious. Actually, it's quite tiresome. One should generate a sincere feeling, a deep feeling of affection and of acceptance of ourselves, of non-judgment. It's a state of non-judgment, but at the same time of non-victimization. I recognize that there's a wound, how it was generated, who did it, how it came about, who's the guilty one. This is not the moment to face that, because it doesn't matter. It already happened. It's the moment instead to accept that pain and heal it. So we take that wound onto the present and we give patience, peace, love, light. And I repeat the part that's not obvious is being able to do it without getting into judgment and without justifying, without blaming, without victimizing oneself. But this is one of the conditions so that it actually works. Because if we start victimizing ourselves, if we start blaming, we're already looking for the solution somewhere else. In this case, we need to simply allow ourselves to accept something that helps this process is the fact that what I have lived, the way I behaved, came within a very complex net of interdependence. And what happened, imagine that what happened is this result of this very complex net, and in front of all the causes and conditions, it couldn't have been different. It doesn't mean that I didn't have a choice. It means that once I made my choice, it couldn't have been anything other than that. Of course, in the present moment, there is the freedom of choice, but once you've made that choice, it's done. And that choice itself is not that free. Only a small part. So being able to see what happened with the awareness that even the past is perfect, in the sense that it couldn't have been different given all the causes and the conditions that had been created. So this allows us to not get into that attitude of blaming and justifying, victimizing ourselves, etc. And if we're able to do this onto ourselves in the present moment, in our past, our present, and our future. So if we're not able to do this on ourselves, then we can't do it to others, because then we would look to others and say, oh, okay, I have compassion for this one, but I have judgment and for this other, and I'm blaming this one, and it's just not going to work. So this practice in itself is easy. In an operational, practical level, if we want to do it a little bit more complete, we sit down, we do a little bit of meditation on our breath. We can do our preliminary practices, the taking of refuge, generation of bodhichitta. Then we do the purification of the place and the offerings. We invite Guru Buddha in front of us. We do the 7-limb practice of prayers and the mandala offering to ask for blessings. After which, and we ask for the blessings, and we ask, oh Guru Buddha, bless me so that I have the strength and the ability to accept the suffering of the past and the suffering of other beings, and to give happiness. Help me to equalize myself with others. And then, in this moment, we do the visualization. We go back to our breath. We imagine the black mass at our heart. We imagine ourselves, our past selves. We take on that. We take on all that suffering into our present selves, and we give the light and peace. And then we do also to our future, to our present selves, and then our past selves, and then to beings around us. And there's no hurry to do it. There's no hurry to do to everyone. this practice to everyone. Maybe we spend weeks and weeks only working on ourselves, and then gradually we're able to expand to our family members and to other beings. This state of equanimity where we don't have attachment to one and aversion to others, but there's this equal feeling towards others, not something that we generate like this. It's gradual, and the objective is to generate to generate this equanimity, and this happens gradually. So at the end of the practice, be it towards our past selves or to others in front of us, we imagine that past self or other beings are at peace, and the black mass at our heart is completely eliminated. So whether it's our past selves, our present selves, our future selves, or other people, we imagine that these two negative forces eliminate each other. And at the end, we try to stay with this feeling of peace and harmony between us and with our object of meditation, our past selves, our present, future selves, or other beings. As I said, it's an easy practice, but it's not necessarily, it's simple practice, but not necessarily easy. Take advantage of this question when he says, and you should begin on taking onto yourself and from yourself. These are the two points.
Just repeat the same thing a little louder, sorry.
So from Tibetan it can be translated by taking on yourself or from yourself. On yourself, it's for yourself. Or
it happens automatically in the sense that from one, how do you say, sì, rispondo in italiano. La domanda è,
the question is, when we take that negativity onto ourselves, if that elimination of the black mass is done, it happens automatically, or if something else we need to do. It happens automatically because once I generate that feeling of taking on myself, that negativity, naturally I'm generating a feeling that's opposite to selfishness itself, and that naturally diminishes it, weakens it. As a visualization, we imagine that as I take on the negativity, as that negativity absorbs into the black mass, when I finish inhaling, it enters. It's as if it weakens more and more, that black mass. So it's not that at the end of the practice that black mass just disappears. No, as we breathe in, the black mass disappears, gets smaller, and weakens. It's like in a dark space. The more light I allow in, the brighter that space gets in. So in the same way, the more negativity absorbs into the black mass, the more it weakens and disappears. That is, in just a few words, the practice of Tonglen, and we don't need to say much more. It's quite simple practice, and it should be done in 2 moments. During formal meditation sessions, as we've just explained, when one finishes, one makes the dedications, Guru Buddha visualized in front, absorbs into oneself, and we conclude the practice. So one can do it. It's very wonderful to do formal meditation sessions exclusively on Tonglen. This is done. And you can also add you can add a short tonelen meditation after the taking of refuge, before I generate bodhichitta. As a support to that, I can do the tonelen practice. This is something that's also possible in between the taking of refuge and generating the mind of bodhichitta. The text continues. And you should begin by taking on yourself or from yourself these two. So concerning the three objects, 3 poisons and 3 virtues, the translation is not so great, because in Tibetan it says 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues. This is the translator trying to make sense of it. It says actually yulsum, 3 objects. Tuk is poison, sum, tuk sum. Getsa is the root of virtue, sum. So 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues. So in English, it's concerning the 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 virtues. Geshe Rinpoche says, it means there are 3 objects. What are the 3 objects? 3 times 3 is 9. We saw this yesterday. The 3 objects are those who are good to us are our friends, those who are bad to us are our enemies, those who do neither good nor bad to us are the indifferent ones. And there are 3 poisons. What are those 3 attitudes? Attraction to friends, aversion to enemies, and indifference to the neutral ones. What are the 3 virtues? Geshe Rinpoche describes them as when in our daily life we find ourselves in front of the 3 objects, because the second part makes reference to how to practice in between sessions, because the practice is divided into 2 parts. During the sessions, during meditation sessions, where we do the tonelen practice as we explained it previously, and then there's the part how to practice in between meditation sessions. I'm walking, I'm at the office, I'm at home, I'm watching the news, I'm in the supermarket, at any moment of the day. How can I practice tonelen in that moment? And here there are there's 4 verses that talk about this, and the first verse says 3 objects, 3 poison, 3 virtues. So during our day, inevitably, many times we will find ourselves in front of these 3 objects. And when we're in front of the 3 objects, spontaneously arises the 3 poisons. And when that happens, there are 2 attitudes, 2 awarenesses to generate. One is towards ourselves. We see where we recognize this mechanism within ourselves, and we generate the intention that we want to be free from that we don't want to nourish that dynamic. So may I be free from this dynamic and try somehow to interact with others beyond this mechanism. So I recognize that there is attraction to these friends. May I be free from this extreme of attraction to friends. May I be free from aversion to others and free from indifference. May I treat everyone with respect and love and gratitude and affection, with compassion. And these are the three virtues. So the virtue in front of the object of attraction, the virtue in front of the object of aversion, and the virtue in front of the object of indifference. So, I'm walking down the street and I see someone in difficulty. I pretend like that to be I'm indifferent, and I pretend to not see. I realize it, and then I turn around, I go back, and I, even if it's not spontaneous or natural, it's contrived, but I try to show respect or gratitude or kindness to that person. If in a situation who acts in a way that I don't like, or I find someone I don't like, I generate some kind of aversion. I see that dynamic within myself, and I recognize that that aversion, actually, what is it? It's a reflection of my own selfishness. And so I try to see that person again with a different attitude, remembering that that aversion actually comes not from that person, but from my own selfishness. So I try to see the other person. I try to have an attitude that's at least neutral, because let's remember, from aversion, we can't then generate a state of attraction. So from aversion, we go to neutrality to then be able to generate a feeling of love or compassion. We can't just jump from aversion to attraction. We need to go through the middle of neutrality. And if we're in front of someone who's a friend, and there's a strong attraction, so even ask ourselves, what am I attracted to? My well-being, because that person treats me well and is my friend, or do I really want the well-being of that person? So I need to change that attitude to really see the other and see that person's well-being beyond myself. So in front of the three objects, there are three mental defilements, and with the awareness of seeing that dynamics, I generate three virtuous attitudes: one towards friends, one towards enemies, and one towards those to whom I am indifferent. Trijang Rinpoche also talks about when we see these attitudes in others, we should generate this feeling, this aspiration: may all beings be free from attraction to some and aversion to others, and aversion to others. Yet still, in just a few words, it's allowing ourselves in our daily lives to recognize and see the dynamic of selfishness. Because when we're able to see it, this simple fact of seeing it is like discovering it, and it becomes really more difficult for it to actually manifest. So this is already a very important part, seeing our own dynamics, recognizing them. And then it says, the instruction to be followed, in short, is to be mindful of the practice in general by taking these words to heart in all activities. So the essence of the instruction is, in our daily lives, we need to practice the Tonlen, remembering these words. How? It's really quite simple. Let's imagine a moment of pleasure. I go, I'm drinking water, I like it. As we feel this feeling of pleasure, what's our natural attitude in that moment of pleasure? Is it a moment of altruism or selfishness? What is that selfish attitude in that moment of pleasure? I want more for myself. It's so delicious. I want even more, and I want it for myself. And if someone gets close, I say, you go find your own. This is my water. It reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. This a little bit of this exaggerated character. It's mine. It's mine. And if you get close, know that I'm ready to protect it. So what happens is when we have a moment of pleasure, what's the natural attitude of our selfishness? Is I want that pleasure for myself. So how can we, in this moment, as I'm enjoying that pleasure, and I allow myself to really enjoy it. There's nothing wrong with that. The stronger the pleasure is, the better it is. The more I enjoy, the better it is, because I take that pleasure, I take that joy, and I imagine to expand it. And as I'm enjoying that pleasure, I imagine, may every being experience what I'm experiencing. May every being live this joy. May every being experience this joy, this pleasure. So we use that moment of pleasure as a tool to increase our altruism, not to increase our own selfishness or self-centeredness. Normally, moments of pleasure increase our own self-centeredness and selfishness. But as I'm feeling that moment of pleasure, may every being take advantage of this feeling. And you can visualize that feeling of pleasure that expands, and everyone who experiences something similar, or just the feeling that sentiment within. May all beings enjoy what I'm enjoying. And remember, when we talk about every being, there are the 5 categories: family members, friends, people we share our daily life with, people we have a neutral feeling, or people that we have some kind of resentment for, and then those with whom we have a negative karmic baggage, let's say. May each and every one of them experience this pleasure. So we use these moments of pleasure to open up our hearts towards others. And the beautiful thing is that if you do it well, it takes away that feeling of guilt of pleasure itself. It's not that you can't enjoy it. The more you enjoy, the better it is, because then you have more to offer to others. And what happens instead if we're having trouble? Maybe we have a very bad headache. That the selfish attitude of that moment of headache is, I don't want this for myself. Our natural selfish attitude is, oh, I have a headache, or any other sensation of suffering, just get it away from me. I don't want it. How do we practice at times like that? Let's take the example of a headache. I have a headache. I don't say, may all beings, may I take on the headache of all beings through my headache. No, it's different. May I, by healing this headache, may I heal the headache of all beings. So through the process of healing, of getting rid of my headache, may I, through what I'm already living, may every being who's living something similar, may they be free of this suffering through this process of mine. And then I do what I need to do. I massage, or I take medicine, whatever it is. But I connect myself with every being who has a similar suffering to mine, a moment of sadness, a moment of fear, a moment of depression, hunger, thirst, physical pain, whatever it is, just loneliness. may, through what I'm experiencing and feeling, and through this process of eliminating that, may every being who is suffering something similar be free from that suffering. In other words, we're using our suffering to see that other beings suffer in the same way, and we are opening up our hearts to them, and we dedicate so that they can be free from that suffering as well. So we use moments of pleasure and moments of suffering as means to open up our own hearts to others. Okay. And this is something practical, possible. There's a beautiful verse that talks about this. Let me see if I can find it. Today I'm lucky. Other times when I've explained it, I would spend hours looking for it. It says, oh. When happy, when joyous, ki means joy, na means if, when, in that moment, so kina, dewa, soktuno, penden nawa kosho. I dedicate that happiness. I dedicate that happiness. May the entire space be filled up with well-being and happiness. When in suffering, I take on to myself the suffering of every being. May the ocean of suffering dry up. In a moment of joy, I imagine that this joy expands, that every being can enjoy that. May everyone just enjoy fully what I'm experiencing. And in moments of suffering, I connect to those moments of sufferings in others. And through this suffering of mine, may all beings be free from that suffering. Another way, for example, if we open up the newspaper, for example, we see the news. Or we go somewhere where we see suffering, or close to someone who's not well. In those moments during our day, we can practice Tonlen in the same way. And one simple way is we take refuge quickly, we ask for blessings. The black mass at our heart. We imagine that suffering of that person that comes to me, comes onto me, diminishes the black mass at my heart. I emanate light rays that nourish that person. Maybe I'm in the hospital waiting for someone, or I'm in front of someone who's suffering. I watch the news. I take advantage of every situation to do it. And Geshe Rinpoche describes other 3 types of visualizations to do this practice quickly, like a flash. Personally, there are 3 visualizations that were difficult for me. So I always go through the black mass and the smoke, but there are other ways, and maybe they'll work very well for you. Because the black mass is a type of visualization that is more gradual, slower. The other 3 visualizations, when you can do them quickly. Once we visualize one's own own selfishness like a big rock, boulder, and you see the suffering of others. They come to you like a kind of like a lightning rod, and it's just in one and it destroys selfishness immediately, and that rock shatters by also it shatters by giving the light to others. Or you can imagine your selfishness like a heap of garbage, and the suffering comes towards you like a kind of hurricane that just blows away all that trash, all that garbage, rubbish. In my ignorance, where would the garbage end up? But that's something else. That's my question. And the other visualization is a little bit special or particular. We imagine that our own selfishness, like a big heap of meat, or like corpses, and the suffering of others comes up like female tigers that come and they just eat up everything. And then I ask myself, what am I supposed to do with these female tigers in my heart? So there are these other forms, and from these visualizations that are explained, there's also space for creativity of your own. So the point is that you're imagining some kind of negative force and then something else that opposes that. So from my point of view, the concept of, two negatives together becomes positive. So in this case, two negative forces eliminate each other. And for my mentality, this works the best for me. But what happens is in our daily lives, even if it's something very fast, we're in front of a moment of difficulty, I take on to me, and in that moment, because what happens is when I'm in front of the suffering of someone else, naturally, we're going to react selfishly. But we break that dynamic. And then we see the other, we show our love for the other. And we try to do this with a certain frequency. Something I assure you, that if you do a half an hour, 15 minutes, not even half an hour, 15 minutes for 1 week, this practice of Tonlen with sincerity, something will change. I am not saying that you're going to become a perfect bodhisattva, but something will change. We start gradually changing our way of being. The delicate thing is this habit of dividing beings into the 3 objects and the 3 poisons. This is a habit that is so deep that even if we start acting against, if we don't give constancy to it, that when we stop, then it just takes up strength as before. Because every time I act with selfishness, I am training in selfishness. It's not that when I'm not doing the Tonlen practice, and that what I was able to do, I set it aside and I can pick it up where I left it off. Unfortunately, no, because mind, a being, I train one way or the other. But not only do we have a strong selfish habit, we're constantly reinforcing that habit. That's why it's important to practice the opposite during our formal meditation session and also in between sessions. Otherwise, I do 15 minutes once a day, and then there are other 23 hours and 45 minutes where I'm training in doing the opposite. That instead, it's important to do in both moments, and it's a direction of the mind. They were gradually adapting. And let's remember what we said at the very beginning when we talked about the 6 awarenesses to listening to the Dharma. And the last of the 6 was this process of healing is slow and graduated. But when we are practicing Tonlan, we are taking the medicine. We need to take it with constancy, and little by little there will be a change. I repeat, it's a simple practice, powerful practice, but not easy. Not easy. Why? Because one reason is our habit of selfishness will show its face. The practice is transmitted, even if it was secret for centuries. And then from the 12th, 13th century, about it it came to the public, let's say. There are certain practices that are still quite secret, because if you don't do it in the right way, it can be harmful. So if the person who learns it doesn't have a solid basis, maybe have a distorted view or not do it in the right way, and can hurt themselves instead of doing something beneficial. In this case, it stayed secret, not because it was dangerous, but because to protect the practice, and because it's very simple conceptually. There are no mysteries, but it requires a very special determination and strength. And so the danger was that if it was transmitted openly, then they were afraid that there were people that would be the great practitioners when instead they weren't, or they would start to use these practices as a tool to nourish their own egos instead of actually facing it. And that's why when we look in the last 2 days that have to do with the commitments of the practice, one actually says, don't transform gods into demons. Don't transform the practice that should eliminate your selfishness into something that actually increases your selfishness. And that was one of the dangers that they thought, and keeping. That's why they kept it secret. But today, sincerely, I think that not all of us here are ready to practice it in an excellent way. Surely. One thing that resolves with the problems is the fact of giving emphasis on the steps of the practice. So that part of taking first onto myself, that resolves this practice. And it's also said that a being doesn't have the ability to judge another being. I see you physically, but what's inside you really, I have no idea. So probably, even if there's only one person who is able to take this and to put it into practice in an excellent way, it's more than enough to be able to share. And there's another point still, is to keep these tools, these techniques alive. And as we said at the beginning, even if we're not able to practice it excellently, a small part a small part practiced well makes a huge difference. So it's even just a change of attitude, even if we're not able to dive in deeply. It's like it's like saying, "Oh, wait, this big boulder, we didn't shatter it, we didn't break it completely, but we put a huge dent in it. If we don't work, if we don't work deeply, at least on a conceptual level, and then over time, little by little, that does its own work." So I invite each one of you to see how to apply this to your own level. We are not in a context from a long time now where we choose, okay, yes, I choose you and you, I teach you and I teach you, because the context is different now. Also, I'm convinced that these techniques are beneficial to everyone, not like certain meditations that if you don't understand well, that you can actually hurt yourself. So this I think that this teaching is it's good to diffuse it the most as much as possible, but under one condition: it works by practicing it. Even if you don't practice, just having listened to it, having reflected on it, having thought about it, that works through us. But that's not an excuse to not do it. But even just that is beneficial. It has left some kind of imprint, but we can really collect the essence once we practice it. And to conclude this practice, I choose to transmit this because I trust you. I trust that you can do this well. I believe that we have this possibility. None of us here is here because culturally, socially, it's important to be here during teachings, or because they give us food or make offerings to us. We're not here because we have any kind of material benefit, or because it's particularly pleasurable, or there's some kind of social cultural benefit. We're here mostly because each one of us, we are looking for something inside to be better within and better outside as well with others. So when there is that real motivation, there is a huge potential. So take this jewel, take it as something precious, and it's up to you to nourish it and take care. So with this, let's conclude this first part. And I repeat, we can spend days talking about Tonglen, but the practice in itself is simple. And this is also the beauty of this practice, because there are very complex meditations with complicated visualizations, or just to describe the visualizations, the hours go by and the many passages. Here, no, it's very simple. There's really very little in terms of quantity, but in terms of essence is enormous, and that's why it's accessible to everyone, and we can all do it. I just repeat one more time. I invite you to at least try it. Try to do it with sincerity for 1 week, starting with yourself, and then gradually going towards others. Now let's go ahead, because I took the commitment to get to the end of the text, and my tendency very often, my enthusiasm at the beginning, I go into many details, and then at the end there's very little time. So let's go forward. Then the practice of, is there any question or doubt about the practice of Tonglen? There are different techniques of visual of there are 3 ways to do this with the breath. The first level that I invite you all to do is to dedicate a certain amount of time to inhale, take the negativity, and don't focus on your exhale. And then after, give emphasis to the exhaling and giving light. When you're able to do that with a certain familiarity, at a certain point, having a more stable breath, one is able to inhale, taking negativity, and exhaling light. Then, a more advanced level, that's the middle range level. Then I inhale black. I inhale black smoke from one nostril, and I exhale light from another. And this requires certain techniques of pranayama. So let's set that aside, but that's not our objective now. The objective now is about generating this mind. We're concentrating on the inner attitude to generate more than these breathing techniques. And the breathing techniques that can be then a support. So once we're able to create so much familiarity with the practice of inhaling and then exhaling, that then we can integrate it with the support of a very stable breathing. First inhale one nostril, exhale another nostril. There are more questions?
Yes, exactly. Welcome. Okay. Tundam chanchu gisem jomanis. Tempa tomne sawate chana mila tabur sams. Ma ke rikpe shilache nyempo nikya rangsar truls. Lamki ngowo kunshi ngala sha tunsam gyume kiburcha.
Training in the ultimate awakening mind, or how to train in ultimate or absolute bodhichitta, how to train the mind in wisdom. Let's remember that this process towards enlightenment, training in general, is to develop method, love, compassion, and wisdom, the correct view of reality. These are the 2 necessary wings to fly towards enlightenment. And we've also said that originally there were 2 paths for these 2 different mythologies. One was to first develop wisdom and then train in compassion. And then more emphasis was given the method where we first give emphasis to love and compassion, and then wisdom and that's how we practice. And what's interesting is, as the more we develop wisdom, the more it reinforces the love and compassion. So the text says, Tempa tomne sangwa ten, when stability has been attained, impart the secret teaching. Let's remember, first of all, that we have inverted the order of the text. So actually, we can take this part and bring it to the beginning. So what is it making reference to? What has stability been attained? The stability has been attained from the preliminary practice. So once you have completed the preliminary practice and have attained it, at this point impart the secret teaching of the teaching on love, love, compassion, and wisdom. Chunamilam Tarbursam. Something that I like so much is this ability that different masters of the past have had, and some in the future I don't have, is to be able to summarize so much into just a few words without losing anything. I mean, here there's just an enormous quantity of things. It's just this few lines. It says, consider all phenomena as dreams. Or it says, Chunam Milam Tabusam. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. The remedy itself is released in its own place. Place the essence of the path on the nature of the basis of all. Lamgi Nuwo Kunshin Shak. And then the last line is, in the period between sessions, be a creator of illusions. We'll explain a little bit today and then more tomorrow. Obviously, we could spend days talking about it, but let's go right to the point. Our suffering comes from the fact that we act taken by selfishness and all our mental defilements, hatred and dissatisfaction, envy, and these feelings generate actions that then bring results to us. And then when we experience these results, we then act again based on our mental defilements. This is how we turn in samsara. All of our mental defilements come from three: attraction, aversion, and indifference. This attitude of attraction, aversion, and indifference are the results of the three sensations. It's the reaction, natural reaction, spontaneous reaction that we have to three types of sensations. Pleasurable sensations, we spontaneously react with attraction. A feeling of suffering, we react with aversion, and a neutral sensation, we feel indifference. In front of these three sensations, we have attachment to pleasure, aversion to suffering, and we try to project it onto something to be happy, so that I can repeat that feeling of pleasure. Keep it, repeat it. I need to have this or do that to avoid or stop that feeling of suffering and make sure it doesn't come back. I need to avoid this or that. What happens, though, is that we live this through this attitude where we are at the center of everything, and everything around that surrounds us, everything we interact with, we see it all in function of these sensations. We experience the world through sensation, and we live and we judge the reality that we perceive through these sensations, pleasurable, displeasurable, or neutral. We generate friends, enemies, and indifference. This comes from this obsession with the self-gratification that comes from the fact that when we see anything, we see the reality that surrounds us, everything that we perceive, as if it existed in an autonomous, separate, independent, objective way. Yesterday we talked about the more coarse level of interdependence, and I asked you, when we wake up when we wake up in the morning, we don't have this awareness of breathing with the whale's poop. We're not able to connect those two things, right? I mean, it's kind of funny. It's a funny story, so you can remember it well. But when we divide things up, we see everything separate. We also see ourselves as being separate from everything. And even our own sensations are separate, as if one thing had nothing to do with anything else. And let me give you another example. Not only do we see everything as being separate, but we see everything as being objective. So when I play the singing bowl, not only do we have the perception that the sound is there and has nothing to do with anything else, but if I asked you, are you able to hear the sound of the singing bowl without philosophizing? Let me do it louder. Can you hear it? Did you hear the sound that I heard without philosophizing? Yes or no? But imagine that you ask someone, are you hearing the sound of the singing bowl? Are you seeing that flower in front of me? When we ask that question implicitly, if we were to get into more details and elaborate the question more, what I'm asking you actually is, are you hearing the sound that I am hearing? Are you seeing that object that I attribute the name flower to, that I see in a certain way? Are you seeing it in the same way as I do, attributing the same name and characteristics that I do? Do you hear the same sound that I hear? Or is our hearing sense power different, and are we seated in different places? Have you had different experiences with this sound? Are you hearing exactly what I'm hearing or not? Do you see exactly what I see or not? No. But when we ask, are you hearing that sound? We're expecting that person to see reality the way we see it, the way we experience it. When I ask you, can you see the flower without analyzing it, I'm saying, do you see the reality? Are you experiencing the reality that I am? Because that reality appears to me as being objective, even if it's subjective. So I treat reality as if it were objective, and that's why I ask you, do you see what I see? When actually it's not like that. So reality appears to us as being objective, autonomous, independent, and we relate to this reality as if it were. This creates self-centeredness, selfishness. This creates this distance, this separation between everything, and this separation creates this projection. It's interesting because it creates an independence from everything, but at the same time it creates a dependence, because if I suffer from what I have, I'm developing attraction to one thing, aversion to one other, to something else. And at the basis of our suffering, the root of our suffering is not selfishness, which is the main cause, but is actually the root that's deeper, is the fact that we relate on a non-conceptual level with ourselves and with everything that we perceive as if it existed in an independent, objective, autonomous way as it appears to us. And this relating to reality in an independent, autonomous, inherent way, this is what we call our ignorance. And there are different analogies to help us understand that. Let's start with the one that I like the most. We look at ourselves in the mirror. Without philosophizing, what do we see? We imagine the mirror in front of us. We imagine ourselves, our own face. If I ask yourselves, when you look in the mirror, do you see your face? Do you see your face in the mirror? Right, yes. It's interesting, at least for me. It's intriguing, even the fact that just to observe that I have never seen my own face. That no one here has ever seen his or her own face. That when I look in the mirror, I'm not seeing my face. What I see is the light that touches my face, reflects towards the mirror, and from the mirror comes back to my eyes. And so what I'm seeing in the mirror is the reflection of the image of my face. It's not the same thing as my face. The reflection of the image of my face is not my face, right? They're two different things, aren't they? The photograph of a person, is that the person? No. When I look in the mirror, analyzing, what is it that I'm looking at? Am I looking at my face or the reflection of the image of my face? But when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you say that, oh, look for the reflection of the image of my face, there's a blackhead? No. Oh, look at the reflection of the image of my face. I am having dark circles. There are dark circles under my eyes. We don't do this. Even if conceptually we understand that what we see in the mirror is the reflection of our face. But when we look in the mirror, how does it appear to us? As being the reflection of the image of our face or our face? It appears to us as being our face. So the appearance is as if it were our face, and we're the ones who can see it truly as being our face or appearing as our face, but understanding that our face it's not. Let's look at another example. The dream. The text makes the reference to dream. When we're dreaming, what we experience during a dream, when we're not aware of dreaming, are we living that experience? If there's a negative situation, do I feel sadness, anger, or fear? If there's something wonderful, do I feel joy and pleasure? I do, don't I? Yeah. If I dream that let's say there's someone sleeping next to me, and in my dream that person dies. When I wake up and I look next to me, is that person alive or dead? Ideally, the person's still alive. So what I live in my dream, no matter how real it felt, that generated a feeling of fear or sadness, it's illusory. Even if the experience of the dream is real, the image of the dream exists, but what doesn't exist is that it exists outside the dream. When I dream that someone dies in my dream, it's not said that it's not said that the person actually dying. Actually, in the Tibetan tradition, it's said that if you dream that someone dies, it's actually a sign of long life. Maybe different, maybe for other cultures. For me, dreams are only dreams. Anyway, that's another topic. In any case, there are 4 states. So one is, as I'm dreaming and I don't know I'm dreaming, I react as if it were real. So I feel fear, attachment, etc. What happens is, while I'm dreaming, I realize that it's just a dream. It appears as being real, but I know that it's not. What happens when I know it's not real? I don't have the same reactions. I can be there, transform that experience. These lucid dreams is an amazing, amazing experience. You can do anything. It's really quite fun. The example that I always give is when I was a child, I had this dream that I got out of bed, and I got out of my bedroom, and then just outside my bedroom there's this wooden banister, and I would jump down from the stairs, and in the dream it seemed very, very high, and I would wake up out of fear. And then I woke up, I said it was just a dream, and I fell back asleep, and I dreamt that again, but knowing that it was just a dream, and I would have fun jumping, sliding down the banister and jumping down the stairs. And I did that. I repeated it 3 or 4 times until it got boring. But that experience of lucid dreaming, where it appears as real, but you don't have the same reactions because you actually know that it's not real. It's just a dream. And that third state is when there's neither appearance nor the grasping at the appearance, because you're awake. If there's the analogy, for example, a full moon, if you're near the lake, you can see the image of the moon in the lake, and we could say, oh, look at the moon in the lake. But is the moon in the lake? No. So there maybe a mirage in the desert. It looks as if there's water, but there isn't any water. And we can go on and on with many, many other examples for these three states. But the image of the dream, does it exist or not? I mean, the dream itself, does it exist? Yes, it exists, but the person, but what happens in the dream is not actually happening. The person in the dream is not the person who is dreaming. So these various analogies show us these illusory characteristics, that there's something that appears that is incongruent with reality. So the image of in the mirror exists, but what about the face in the mirror? No. So what's the illusory characteristic of the image of the face in the mirror? Is that it appears as if it were the face in the mirror, but it's not. What's the illusory characteristic of the dream? It appears as if it were real, but real it's not. And we can go on and on. So when we perceive reality, the sound of the singing bowl, for example, the flower that I see, how does it appear to us without analyzing as being something interdependent? And so the sound is the union of the vibration in the air, comes from the singing bowl, and my sense power of hearing that interacts with my sense consciousness and the value that I attribute to it. And all of this generates the experience of sound. Or is it something autonomous and independent that is just there? When I see something, how does it appear to me? Does it appear as being interdependent or as being of an independent, objective, autonomous existence? It's fundamental to understand that reality as it appears as if it were objective when actually it's subjective. reality appears to us as being autonomous and independent when in actuality it's interdependent. So, reality exists, but it doesn't exist in an objective, inherent way. It exists as being interdependent and subjective. So consider all phenomena as dreams. It doesn't say don't think of all phenomena, don't consider phenomenon to be dreams. No, reality has an illusory aspect, but it's not an illusion. Consider everything you perceive as having an illusory aspect. What's that illusory aspect? It appears as if it existed in an objective, independent way, but in reality it's not. This first line makes reference to observing reality around us. And the next two are a little bit more complicated, and we're not going into details now, that say Maki Rikpa Shilache, examine the nature of unborn awareness, where we first meditate on the reality of so examine the nature of unborn awareness is that our own mind is empty of inherent existence. So meditate on the lack of inherent existence of your own mind. And the third one, the remedy itself, the emptiness itself, is released in its own place. The lack of inherent existence is actually empty. So one's own lack of inherent existence is empty of inherent existence. It doesn't exist in an independent, autonomous way. So the first one, consider all phenomena as dreams, is considering the emptiness of all the phenomenon outside. So we can spend months talking about this, but what we see in the meditative process, the first we need to meditate or generate the mind that perceives that even reality around us appears to us as being autonomous, independent, and objective. It's not like that. And to do this, following the advice of Lama Tsongkhapa, we need to put emphasis in reflecting and meditating on the interdependence of all phenomena. The more we're able to see how everything depends on causes and conditions, how it depends on its own parts to exist, how it depends on a mutual dependency, and how everything that we perceive depends on the relationship with the observer, the more easily we'll be able to see that even if something appears to us as being of autonomous existence, objective existence, it is not like that. This is the first level, which is already so much, and you have wonderful results if you get there. The danger that exists that one starts to observe the world surrounding as lacking inherent existence, and one can perceive instead that the mind on a deeper that the mind is something objective. But no, even also our mind on a deeper level, it doesn't exist independently from its relationships. It doesn't exist independently from its own causes, conditions, from its own process of conditioning. So even our own mind is empty of inherent existence. Lacks inherent existence, is not objective. But to be able to meditate on that there's a text that explains on how to do it, which is called the root of the Mahamudras, beautiful text, where first there's the whole initial process of how to meditate on our own mind, because if I don't see my own mind, how can I see that it's empty of inherent existence? It's like wanting to meditate on the lack of inherent existence of the flowers without understanding what a flower is. So the process, first we need to be able to see our own mind to then meditate on the lack of inherent existence of the mind itself. And then there's the next level, and one could even say the reality around me doesn't exist autonomously in an independent way. Even my own mind is not like that. But one could relate oneself with the lack of inherent existence, the so-called shunyata, emptiness, as something that existed as on an absolute level, that existed in an autonomous, independent way. But even the lack of inherent existence of emptiness itself lacks inherent existence, even if it appears differently. Even emptiness itself is empty of inherent existence. And these are the 3 levels of emptiness. Now, as I said, it's not something that we're going to go into too many details. The first level of practice, instead, which is a tremendous amount, where we do an analytical meditation on emptiness, or take the sound, for example, and we start to see how does the sound appear. It appears as being something, it seems outside myself, something separate, and we start to see it. But how is it actually? We start asking ourselves, how does the sound? It seems silly to say, what is sound? Where is the sound? Where can you find the sound? Is the sound in the singing bowl? Is it in the air? Is it in my hearing? Is it in the union of all 3? Is it in the mind that perceives it? Because, for example, that sensation of feeling, of touch, when you're anesthetized, do you feel pain? No. Why don't you feel pain when you've had anesthesia? That sensory, that contact with the skin, the sensory object is there. I mean, there's contact, and that sense power exists too. Yes. Why don't you feel pain even if someone is touching us? Because somehow it has blocked that relationship between sense consciousness of touch and the sense power of touch. So I leave this question open to you. Reflect on it. What the mind does not perceive. For example, if you've had anesthesia, that touch, does it exist or not? Another example. A person who for neurological reasons cannot see, the light comes to the eyes. The sense power of seeing is perfectly functional, but for neurological reasons, the sense consciousness of seeing cannot elaborate that light. So for that person, do lights and form exist or not? No, they can't see them. So no. Sound is the union of 3 parts: the vibrations in the air, sense object, sense power, and sense consciousness, to which we attribute a meaning. But without these 3 things, sound does not exist. Someone who is deaf can perceive sound through touch, but that's not sound, that's touch. So the question, what is sound is not so banal. When I ask myself, what is form? What am I seeing? It's a union of light with different frequencies, a sense power that's able to perceive these various frequencies, this sense consciousness that is also able to elaborate those signals, and then discernment that attributes a meaning to that. And even more, when I take anything that I perceive, what I perceive doesn't exist independently from all the relationships. Another example, here we're together, I meet someone, in this moment, what I am now cannot exist without your presence. And what you perceive, what you are, it doesn't exist without my presence. Because we exist in a reciprocal dependence. See, and it's true for every phenomenon. It's impossible to take any phenomenon and see it detached from everything else, because nothing exists independently from its interactions. Reflect on this, observe this, and observe how reality appears to us. And then ask yourself, is it like this or is it like that? How is it? And analyze, seek out answers, observe. And this brings us gradually to the last part of the text that says, place the essence of the path on the nature of the basis of all. And this makes reference, place the essence on the path, on the formal meditation, on the lack of inherent existence, about meditating on emptiness. And in the period between sessions, be a creator of illusions. Be a magician. What does that mean? When a magician creates an illusion, traditionally in ancient texts, it said that a magician, an illusionist, would do that on the basis of substances, actually use hallucinogenics, and through the power of spell. So the power of the substance and the spell, and through the power also of concentration, is able to create experiences to who is present, spectators. And it's said that the actual magician, he lives the illusion himself, because he's also under the effect of the spell and the substances, but he sees that illusion, but he knows that it's an illusion, that it's not real. And so in between sessions, be the creator of illusions. So reality will keep appearing as if being of inherent existence, but know that it's not. Everything that I perceive, I see that person, and I think that I see that the appearance is you are there and I am here, but I know that it's not like that. When you're able to relate to everything without having the appearance of inherent existence, it means relating, it means having reached Buddhahood. And that's why we use the term the awakened one. And the awakened one, in Italian they use reawakened one, because there isn't this term awakened one. Also in English. So let's use up a new word and say the one who is it's not that he was ever asleep and is now awake. Anyway, so we have these three levels. So we have the appearance of inherent existence and doesn't know that that's illusory, and one grasps at that appearance as if it were, and one acts accordingly. One who's had a direct experience and knows that even if reality appears as such, like the illusionist, the magician, doesn't grasp at that appearance. And then that third level, one is that reality actually appears as being interdependent, and one doesn't even have the appearance of inherent existence, and that would be a Buddha. So in the meantime, let's meditate on interdependence. We familiarize ourselves with interdependence, familiarize ourselves with seeing the appearance of intrinsic existence. It's very important to not be in a hurry to meditate on emptiness. There's no hurry to say reality doesn't exist in an objective way. Much more emphasis should be given to allowing ourselves to see how appearance seems of inherent existence, so that we can then deconstruct it. So we negate that appearance, and this is the other part of our training. So our training is made up of love and compassion and wisdom. Wisdom understood as seeing reality in a consistent, coherent way, seeing subjective reality as being subjective, seeing reality that appears as reality as if seeing reality that is free from an inherent existence. When you say see phenomena as dreams, it means it has an illusory aspect, and this illusory aspect should be seen as illusory, and that illusory aspect is everything that appears as being objective and autonomous. It is not like that. It's not like that because it's interdependent. It's just to leave a little bit the point of reflection. There are many texts that can help you understand this. One needs to read, reflect, follow many teachings, have doubts, and looking to answer your own questions that will help you so much. And there are many texts that will help you. And there's one book from an Italian author. I read it recently. I liked it a lot. Talks about this specifically. And given that it comes from the Italian culture, it could maybe help you. Its book is written by Carlo Rovelli. It's called Helgoland. The whole book helps, but then there's one specific chapter that talks actually about Nagarjuna. That's beautiful, and he talks exactly about what we're talking about, but he uses terminology and a basis of quantum physics. And it's really down to earth. It's much more down to earth than an overly scientific. It's really beautiful how often looking from different perspectives, we get to the same result. So the point is about reflecting on interdependence. Try to recognize try to see how appearance seems to be of inherent existence, and then deconstruct it. You can do this in meditation, and you can do it in your daily life as well. Last thing, why would wisdom increase our love and compassion? when I understand that reality is interdependent, that reality is empty of inherent existence, and not perceiving that generates that cycle of suffering, and I see someone to whom reality appears as being of intrinsic existence and falls and grasps at that and falls into that trap and reacts accordingly, I generate the compassion that says, I want you to be free from that ignorance. This is called, this is the compassion without object. In Tibetan it's called like that. It means when I understand that the other being is suffering because of his own ignorance, grasping at this inherent existence as it appears, and when I desire that person to be free from that ignorance, this is one of the deepest levels of compassion that we can have. And when I desire the other to be happy, and I want that person to live free from ignorance with the awareness of interdependence. So it's a much deeper level of loving compassion. Another interesting thing, and I'm just going to leave this as a point of reflection without getting into details, it's only through the understanding of the lack of inherent existence that one can understand what a Buddha is. Just observe the analogy of the dream when you're awake. So it's through a correct view of reality that it's possible to really develop the desire to become a Buddha, because otherwise one doesn't even understand what a Buddha is. And that's one of the main reasons why there's the path where first we develop the correct view of reality, and then we develop this desire to reach Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, because without the understanding of emptiness, we can't have that deep understanding. But at the beginning, we have this faith in Buddha, that the Buddha is all the qualities developed to its maximum potential and lacking all mental defilements. So it's not totally clear to us, but with great faith, we don't understand everything, but we understand. But once we understand really what emptiness is, that brings us much more clarity about what a Buddha is, and helps us understand better what it means when we take refuge, etc. So, if along this process of meditating and reflecting on interdependence and the lack of inherent existence, one should generate a sensation of distance from beings, and one says, oh, okay, well, it's I see suffering, but it lacks inherent existence, and it's it doesn't exist, then that means I'm meditating in the wrong way. If the more I'm able to meditate on the lack of inherent existence, and the more I'm able to connect with you, because I see how it all works, if then the stronger my love and compassion becomes, that means that I'm meditating in the right way. What's important that when you go to meditate on the lack of inherent existence, reflect on it, it should increase our love and compassion, and at the same time diminish the suffering that one experiences by seeing the suffering of others. Let me explain myself. When I see the suffering in another being, and I don't want that being to suffer, it couldn't happen that I suffer too. And my suffering is because I don't accept that suffering. I don't want to see that suffering. So I'm faced with, I have a kind of conflict that I want something, but instead I have something else. I mean, my suffering comes from that. When, with the developing of wisdom. I don't want you to suffer, but I understand that you're suffering because of a complex interdependence that comes from your ignorance and your mental defilements in your actions. So I accept what's happening. I don't live in a state of conflict in between what I see and what is. And so there's no more suffering. What there is the determination to interact with you in the best way to help you not suffer anymore. I don't know if this difference is clear. So together with love and compassion, we need to also develop wisdom and the correct view of reality, the consciousness, the awareness of interdependence and the lack of inherent existence. And together with this, we have the basis of the path. These are the two trainings, love and compassion, the practice of Tonglen in meditation and outside meditation, and meditating on the interdependence and the lack of inherent existence in meditation and in between sessions. If we're able to do this with a certain constancy, this is what allows us to develop the two wings to fly towards Buddhahood, the basis of the path towards enlightenment, very quickly. With this, we conclude the main part of the training, but then there are all these accessory side parts, which are the third one, how to transform adverse circumstances into the path, the integrated practice of a single lifetime, number 4, and this is also how to prepare ourselves for death, and number 5, how can I see if I'm training in the right way or not, and number 6 and 7 are all creating guidelines so that we can follow this path well. These are the commitments and vows, precepts, commitments. These are small rules that one sets for oneself to stay on the path. So dreams exist, and if I'm able to have a lucid dream, that's great. But dreams is a marvelous world that can open up many doors to our understanding. No, it doesn't. It's not going. The only correlation with the dream here is an analogy to help us understand that reality appears in one way, appears in a way that it's not. Just like in a dream, unless you're having a lucid dream. But, I mean, even if you have a lucid dream, it appears in a way that it's not. But, it doesn't have anything contradictory in any other kind of practice. Okay. So, let's conclude here for today. Tomorrow and tonight, we will see each other with this formality of passing from one year to the next, even if this is this convention of midnight, and we respect the culture of every place, even if New Year starts at dawn tomorrow. And then tomorrow we're sharing another method for the development of love and wisdom, which is the practice of Buddha Maitreya. There will be the empowerment of Maitreya, and the day is structured slightly differently. And then after the day after tomorrow, on the 2nd of January, we'll pick up again the 7-point mind training. I'm happy to have concluded this part today because I've been able to enter into my chrono program. So I'm leaving also space for the other parts that are very important.
Drove munsela tatu ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sada lamge yenten rabzone dorje change kopa nyur tobu sho nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shin Ninsen taktu delek pe Kuncho sumki chingi lom Kuncho sumki ngodrupso Kuncho sumki trashi shon
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to obtain all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and spring all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Omahun Tambalame Sangerimboche, Kyobalame Tamjorim, Trembalame Gindurimboche, Kyamne Kuncho Sumla Chepabe. Buon appetito. Grazie a tutti.